Recording, sorry. There we go. Um, hi everyone. My name is Katie Dar. I am the chair of the U.S. Biosphere Network's Communications Committee, and I also coordinate the Champlain-Adirondack Biosphere Network. We are thrilled today to be kicking off the U.S. Biosphere Network's Biosphere Bites series. We were inspired by other UNESCO partners to create a dedicated informal space to support regular exchange and learning across the U.S. Biosphere Network and with our international partners as well, as that's such a strength of being part of the U.S. Biosphere Network and the World Network of Biosphere Reserves more broadly. So these 30-minute talks will happen bi-weekly and will cover a broad range of topics, but all will connect to highlighting work that is improving human connections to nature and making progress towards sustainable development goals in biosphere regions. Again, these talks will be recorded so folks who can't attend live can access them later, and they will be posted on the U.S. Biosphere Network's YouTube page, which I will link shortly. The usual Zoom housekeeping: please keep yourself on mute if you're not presenting or asking a question in the Q&A. Feel free to put questions as they arise in the chat, and we can get to those during the question and answer period. I'd also welcome folks to introduce themselves and what biosphere region they're tuning in from, if that's applicable. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jim Brangan, who is brave enough to take the first Biosphere Bite. He is the co-chair of the Champlain-Adirondack Biosphere Network. He is also the Cultural Heritage and Recreation Coordinator for the Lake Champlain Basin Program and the Assistant Director of the Champlain Valley National Heritage Partnership. And I think he might win for longest business card in the office. His work focuses on facilitating cooperation among partners in New York, Vermont, and Quebec on efforts that improve appreciation of the region's natural and cultural resources. We're lucky to have him today to speak about using art to connect people and nature, science and history in biosphere regions. So take it away, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Let me start by sharing my screen. It's my pleasure to be with you all today. I'm here to speak about some of my favorite things, which is cultural heritage and the arts, and getting people to better understand the resources that we're all trying our best to protect. Let me see if I can get this to do a full screen so you don't get a preview of what I'm doing and I'm not seeing what I'm supposed to be hitting here. Anyway, we'll do it this way then. So as Katie said, I am the Cultural Heritage and Recreation Coordinator for the Lake Champlain Basin Program. The Lake Champlain Basin is located along that historic corridor between the Hudson River, Lake Champlain, the Richelieu River. We actually drain north into the Richelieu River, which drains into the St. Lawrence. We have a basin of about 9,000 square miles. About 600,000 people live here. We manage our basin through influence. We have no real authorities other than working with our partners to make improvements to our environment and other aspects of the basin as well. The Lake Champlain Basin's been around since 1990. It was established by an act of Congress. Took us a couple of years to get a management plan in place, and we've been in business since 1992. There are four elements of our management plan. First being clean water, the second being healthy ecosystems, the third being thriving communities, which is where I live mostly, and also an informed and involved public is the fourth element of our management plan. As I said, thriving communities is really my wheelhouse. My job basically is to help people create a better appreciation for the resource. And the way we do that is people make connections to our natural resources in many different ways. Some folks start caring about water quality when they're on the water, either fishing or canoeing. Some people like the view sheds when they're traveling around hiking or even driving around in their vehicles or riding their bikes, even better. And some people make connections through history. We have a very, very rich history up here in the Champlain Valley. And so my job is to take that, to create an opportunity for appreciation, have that appreciation lead to understanding, and have that understanding lead to better stewardship. It's a pretty simple formula. So it's appreciation, understanding, stewardship. Now, Katie said that I am also the Assistant Director of the Champlain Valley National Heritage Partnership. We are one of 61 National Heritage Areas in the United States. And we have three areas of focus, which are our interpretive themes. But let me just point out on the map on where we live within the basin. So you can see the squiggly outline here is the Lake Champlain Basin, and then these geographic geopolitical lines are the counties that abut Lake Champlain and its interconnected waterways. EPA likes watersheds, National Park Service likes counties. So it's not exactly a perfect fit, but you can see that things are very aligned here. Back when they were studying whether or not we should become a national heritage area, the National Park Service identified two interpretive themes. The first is the making of nations, which allows us to go back to pre-contact era with the First Nations, the native tribes that lived here, and allows us to interpret colonization, the effects of that, the American Revolution, what led up to the American Revolution, and the effects of the revolution itself, into how our government's evolved. I won't get too deep in the weeds, but we've got some very interesting opportunities to teach civics here. And you may have noticed from the map that we also include some counties in Quebec. We are the only national heritage area that is tasked with working with a foreign nation, something I'm quite proud of, and something that we really necessarily need, because our story is so tied to the communities along the Richelieu River. The second interpretive theme that we focus on is the corridor of commerce. As you can tell from this map, you can see at the northern part of the map is the St. Lawrence River. Montreal is here. The Richelieu connects Lake Champlain to ports north. And people have been trading in this corridor since the glacier receded 10,000 years ago. This allows us to talk about how commerce has evolved and how commerce continues to affect us to this day. So when we were putting together the management plan for the heritage area, the public actually pointed out to us that there was an element missing, and that was the human interaction with the landscape. And we asked the National Park Service, is it possible for us to add an interpretive theme? The interpretive themes need to tell a nationally important story, and we also have to have a landscape that is capable of telling that story. There are certain landscapes that have been overdeveloped in the United States that prevent heritage programs from really doing a good job at presenting the history. We have an intact landscape for all three of these interpretive themes, and we have nationally important stories. And I'll get into that a little bit here in a moment. But let me just introduce the biosphere to you. As Katie said, my business card is quite long. And the biosphere is an interesting shape. You can see the outline of the Lake Champlain Basin to the east. And then to the west, we include all of the Adirondack Park. It's sort of an interesting boundary, but it's what we have, and it actually really works well for us. We were established as a biosphere in 1989. The Department of State contacted UNESCO and put in an application for this region to be a biosphere. And the interesting thing about how the Champlain Valley National Heritage Partnership, the Lake Champlain Basin Program, and the Biosphere Connect is there's many facets, but the one that I really hold on to is that conservation and community interpretive theme. It's really the glue that holds all three of these programs together. And just to talk a little bit about the topic at hand, how arts have have played a significant role in environmental stewardship, conservation. It's a long history. It's quite fascinating, actually. So if you bring yourself back 200 years in time in this country, you are dealing with what seems like boundless resources. We were fortunate enough to live in a land of plenty, but unfortunately at the time we were not really very good stewards of the land, meaning that we would cut forests, burn the trees into potash that we could transport elsewhere, or just let the stumps rot while we farmed around them. And there was an impact. There was an impact that not many people saw, and there's several reasons why people weren't seeing that. The first is that people were limited in their travels. If you remember the map that I showed you earlier, the Champlain Valley, with our connection with the Richelieu River and the St. Lawrence River, all of our trade went north. Very, very, very little went to the south, went to New York City and points south. And that really didn't change until 1823, when the Champlain Canal connected the Hudson River to Lake Champlain. Once that happened, everything changed. And we saw a tremendous impact here in the Champlain Valley when that happened. Now, back in those days, there was really no illustrations in newspapers. Newspapers didn't get illustrated until 1855, believe it or not. So there were narrations, there was written reports of some of the wonders out there. In fact, there was a member of the Lewis and Clark party named Coulter who gave reports on the Yellowstone country, and people simply didn't believe him. They needed to see, but they weren't able to because the artists hadn't made it out that early in our history. But in the early 1820s, local artists started capturing some of the wonder and some of the impacts from human development. And this is one of my favorite paintings. This is Thomas Cole, a founding member of the Hudson River School of Painting. Another reason, of course, this is beautiful, and we could get into a discussion of why it's so poignant. But for me, this is a view that I saw as a young man. I grew up about 25 miles south of this location. This is the Oxbow on the Connecticut River. That's just south of Northampton, Massachusetts. The Oxbow is, you can still see where the Oxbow is. It's right on 91. But if I was living in the town I grew up in, I probably would have never seen this scene, because it was too far of a trip for me to take. And this image is exceptionally poignant to me, because I've been here so many times, and the fact is that I would have never visited this until there was better transportation. This Hudson River School approach really showed the bounty of our nature and the threats to that nature. You can see here the fields have been cleared. There's very little trees. The trees that are here have been cut and destroyed by other elements as well. So this gave Americans the opportunity to see what was out there beyond their usual scope of transportation. The written word also played an important role, excuse me, in these early days. James Fenimore Cooper, I was a big fan of Cooper, and I still am. But as a young man, I read all of his books, and I remember reading the pioneers about how Natty Bumppo, Hawkeye, was in the Ohio territories, and the description in the book talks about the passenger pigeon. The passenger pigeon was a very flock-reliant bird, meaning that there was millions of them. They needed large flocks to survive. And Natty Bumppo was protesting the overhunting of the birds. The birds could fly over for 3 days, blocking out the sun. That's how many of these animals there were in the early 1800s and earlier than that. And Natty Bumppo was warning that they were over harvesting them. James Fenimore Cooper was pretty prescient in the fact that the last of these birds died in the Cincinnati Zoo in 1913. Henry David Thoreau and the rest of the transcendentalists were doing fantastic work in their writing, connecting the spirituality of nature to humans. And there's also Audubon, who was painting birds across the United States about the same time, 1820s, 1830s. He is very well known for warning about the Carolina parakeet, which is a beautiful multicolored bird that ironically, sadly, died in the very same cage as that passenger pigeon 4 years later in the Cincinnati Zoo. So these are the early warning signs of a country that is being abused. The environment is not being treated in any sense of stewardship, in any sense of the word. You can see this is another Kensett. This is Kensett from the Hudson River School, and this is the
he's giving a talk.
Lake Champlain. And this shows some of the environmental degradation that was happening on Lake Champlain. So the arts, and of course I have to just show Beardstock, which is a phenomenal painting. This is a little bit later in the 1800s, 1868, when the Hudson River School artists and their proteges were moving out west and really helping Americans better understand the natural resources that are out there, the spectacular resources that were in need of protection. As I said earlier, the Yellowstone country, people didn't believe the reports of those until painters and photographers came back with evidence of what it looked like. And as soon as that evidence became available, those lands were protected. And so art has played a major role in environmental conservation and also in some of our social issues as well. I mean, if you want to fast forward a little bit to beyond the era of Beardstock, is you can think about the photographs by Jacob Riis and others of children working in the mills in the early 1900s. In my lifetime, I've seen, music be a driving force in ending the Vietnam War. I didn't truly understand the effects of the AIDS epidemic until I started seeing images of the AIDS quilt on the National Mall. And when I saw that, I was shocked at the amount of damage that virus had done to my fellow Americans. I'd read things, I'd seen the reports, I'd seen the news, but until I saw it in art form, in this case with fiber art, I really didn't get a good understanding of the damage that was happening at the time. So I have long been an appreciator of what art can do for environmental social issues. And in my work, we've started introducing art into our efforts. Every year, the Champlain Valley National Heritage Partnership focuses in on one of our interpretive themes. And back in 2019, we focused on the International Year of the Salmon. It's just a great opportunity for us to really celebrate the fantastic story of the Atlantic salmon on Lake Champlain. As I said earlier, the Champlain Valley was heavily abused. The environment here was heavily abused. Forests were cut, rivers were dammed. Those forests that were cut created erosion, so dammed rivers and sedimentation into the spawning habitat basically extirpated the salmon from Lake Champlain. And it wasn't until the early 70s that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and its partners in Vermont and New York reintroduced the salmon. And so this International Year of the Salmon really gave us an opportunity to celebrate the good work that's been done, and to really have people get a better understanding of why it happened. Creating that understanding, appreciation to understanding to stewardship. And the interesting thing was that there were so many arts programs that were associated with the International Year of the Salmon. The one I want to focus in on was a homemade movie from a group of folks up in Swanton that really just put together a fun little film about salmon in the Missisquoi River. And that sort of started the whole process of how can we really start using film and painting and song and fiber arts and all these other things. How can we start incorporating that? Well, it started sort of, it was natural, but it also was intentional. We really utilized the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act back in 2022 to focus on to bring art into the work of the Lake Champlain Basin Program. The Clean Water Act really well, it was a watershed event that really changed the way we live. And so the Champlain Valley National Arts Partnership and the Lake Champlain Basin Program pulled out the stops. And one of those stops was establishing a dedicated artist in residence program that brings artists into a place, whether it's a museum, a studio, a school, and has that artist work with kids and with everyone in developing art that better interprets our environment. The first one that we worked on was with Blue Seed Studios over in Saranac Lake, New York. This is Professor Kurt Steger from Paul Smith's College. And Professor Steger was good enough to work with 6 artists around Saranac Lake. 3 of them were Native Americans, and 3 of them were people like me that grew up in mill towns along rivers. And it's really interesting to see how these artists interpreted this work. I was very pleased to see that they used paper as a medium. Some of them did, at least 2, and which is sort of, again, ironic because the paper mills had polluted Lake Champlain to the point in the 1870s that at the mouths of the Bocat and the Saranac River, they were doing with eutrophication, meaning there was no oxygen at the mouths of those rivers. So it was just kind of, in this case, delightfully ironic to see them use that. And you can see this is an interpretation of a core sample that Professor Steger has here. Dave Fadden, a local Haudenosaunee or Iroquois artist, lent his talents to develop this beautiful painting, which is a series of tiny mosaics. If you ever get a chance to see this, it hangs at Paul Smith's College now. These are very small images of various things that just struck Dave as something he wanted to put in the painting. There's a Darth Vader in there and a Yoda as well for you Star Wars fans. This on the right is a dress made by another Paul Smith's professor, Michaeli Glennon, who this is called the Greta, and it's after Greta Thunberg, the climate activist. And Michaeli used climate data to illustrate in a wearable fashion, if you will, how much the world's the temperature of the Earth has changed over time. So you see at the bottom here, these are The red indicates much warmer temperatures than the top. Another Native American artist used multimedia. Let's see if I can get this to go. She used ceramic and film and music. I can only show you the ceramic and the film, but you can see that this is a basin, a water basin, that she projects various scenes that are of water or water reliant images. So it's just been wonderful to see what artists can do. And it's not all, these grandiose items. We also have programs that work with local school kids. So we've had artists go into the local schools where they go to this creek behind their school, and they interpret the life there, develop interpretive trails, and that sort of thing. Right now, we have 3 programs underway. This should be 2024, but there are 3 artist in residence programs, one in Vermont, one in New York, and one in Quebec. The one in Vermont is focusing in on the African American experience in the Champlain Valley. The one in New York is another Paul Smith's professor, Glenn McClure, who is taking water quality data and turning it into music. And then the one up in Quebec is an artist that is creating a floating sculpture of a dam that she will be able to move from place to place that interprets what kind of impact dams have had on the water quality of Lake Champlain and Champlain Valley. And in 2024, the Champlain-Adirondack Biosphere is focusing, the Champlain Valley National Heritage Partnership is focusing in on the biosphere and the conservation community interpretive theme. We have 12 projects totaling almost $300,000 that will focus on the biosphere. 3 of those projects focus on the arts. One is a blacksmithing project that's happening at the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum in Vergennes, Vermont. Another is Michaela Glennon lending her talents and fiber arts during World Adirondack Water Week. She'll be going to schools beyond that, and people will be interpreting water quality and the environment through fiber arts there. And then down at Glens Falls, we have the Folk Life Center, the Crandall Public Library, developing a series of documentaries. So all 3 different types of art, hoping to create that linkage between appreciation, understanding, and stewardship. I'm a little bit over time, but I do have time for questions, or we can just look at this beautiful painting while we wrap up the last few minutes.
Thanks, Jim. Really appreciate that, and the link between the historical role of art and connecting people in the environment and some more of those contemporary examples within the Champlain-Adirondack Biosphere. So we have like 1 minute. So I don't know if anyone has any questions for Jim. If they come to you later, I'm sure he'd be happy to follow up as well. I don't know, Kelly, is that a clapping or did you have a hand? Okay.
Well, if you want to learn more about art and the environment, I have written an essay that's in our fiduciary agent's latest newsletter that makes those linkages a little bit stronger and maybe not so meandering.
Thanks, Jim. Not seeing any hands go up, and recognizing we are at the 12:30 mark. I want to invite everyone to join us back at this Zoom link, same place, same time in 2 weeks, March 27th. We'll hear from Cascade Head about how they're applying some of the lessons learned from a trip to New Zealand, where they learned a lot about the rights of nature, and how they're applying those in the Cascade Head Biosphere region. So we hope you'll join us for the future Biosphere Bites, and I'll place a link in the chat if you're interested in doing your own. Again, these are informal 30 minutes and will be made available to our networks through recordings as well. So thank you everyone for joining us for our first one. Kelly, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts that you need to share. Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Jim. Excellent.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time.